Hello, Flossie dear. I thought we'd carry on with our story, A Toad for Tuesday. Do you remember? It's a very long time since we were reading it, but Wharton, the toad, was hopping off to see his Aunt Tulia with some beetle brittle, which he'd put in a box and he thought she would like. And he had got caught by the owl, and the owl had held him captive in his treehouse, saying that he was saving him for Tuesday, which was his birthday, and then he was going to eat him. And do you remember that while the owl was out, this little mouse called Si came up into the tree and said he was going to save Wharton? And Wharton went down the tree with Si and met up with all Si's mouse brothers, and they set off on the journey. So here we are on the journey. As they zipped along, Wharton said, "I never dreamed you had so many brothers, Si." "They're not even all here," said Si, "because of the accidents." "Accidents?" said Wharton. "Yesterday, when we were trying out our new skis for the first time, 14 of my brothers ran into each other," Si explained. 7 turned their ankles, 4 banged their noses, and 3 backed into ski poles and won't be able to sit down for at least a week. Then he began to sing a stirring marching song. The 2 brothers behind him joined in, then the next 2 and the next, until the whole string of skiing mice were singing loudly as they whooshed along. After they had gone some distance, they came to an open meadow on a hillside, and at the bottom was an icy stream. "We'll rest here a short time," said Si. "When we're refreshed, we will finish our journey." "Good," said Wharton. "That will give me a chance to thank you and all your brothers." He never finished, for something had caught his eye. Down below, near the stream, some kind of a struggle was going on. Puffs of snow flew in every direction. Even from such a distance, a great deal of screeching and growling could be heard. When the snow cleared away for an instant, Wharton saw something he thought he knew. "George," he said under his breath, shielding his eyes from the bright sun. He looked again. He was right. George the owl was struggling frantically to free himself from the jaws of a snarling fox. Wharton could see at once that George didn't have the slimmest chance. Even now the owl's wings were flapping weakly against the snow, while flying feathers filled the air. Wharton hopped to his feet and strapped on his skis. "Where are you going?" asked Si. "I'm going to help George." "George? Who's George?" "George the owl," said Wharton. But I thought we were helping you to get away from him," said Si in bewilderment. "Yes," said Wharton, "but I just can't stand here and watch that fox eat him." "But he was going to eat you." Wharton wasn't listening. He pushed off towards the icy stream. Si scratching his head. "I never did understand toads." "Well, come on, my brothers," he squeaked with a twitch of his whiskers. "Let's give him a hand." At once all the mice jumped onto their skis and pushed off after Wharton. The sunny hillside was one great wave of skiing mice as they flashed over the glistening snow. A powdery cloud rose high behind them as the 100 mice and 1 toad swept downwards. There's poor old George, nearly eaten by the fox. It's not a very nice picture, Floss, is it? I think we'll move on. The fox looked up and blinked unbelievingly. Faster and faster they came, the sharp points of their poles glittering like diamonds, and each one pointing straight at him. Quickly the fox decided that he wanted no part of whatever it was. He released the owl and bounded off through the deep snow as fast as his shaking legs would go. The toad was the first to reach the owl. Most of the mice stopped a safe distance away, but Si and a few of his brothers kept right on after the terrified fox. Wharton looked sideways at the crumpled owl. Feathers were scattered all over the snow. Some floated slowly away in the icy stream. The owl's wings were badly tattered, and one of his big yellow eyes was swollen completely shut. As he looked at the once proud bird, Wharton felt sad. "Hello, Warty," said the owl weakly. "Hello, George," said the toad. "What are you doing here?" asked the owl. "I'm escaping." The owl's one good eye opened wide. "Escaping? Escaping from what?" he said, clearly annoyed. "From you," said the toad. "Today is your birthday and you said you were going to eat me. I was to be your special treat." The owl started to shake his head, but it hurt too much. "Didn't you just see my note?" he said, sounding more and more exasperated. Then Wharton remembered the piece of paper he had cleared from the table. I didn't have time." "Well, if you had, you would have known that I was coming home soon and that I was going to bring you a surprise." "A surprise?" said Wharton. "That's what I said. I first came here to the stream to get a nice fish for your supper, which I did, but the surprise is over there, and that's where the fox caught me." The owl turned and pointed at some bluish-green bushes. "Why, those are juniper bushes," said the toad. "That's right," said the owl. "You said juniper berries make your favourite kind of tea, didn't you?" Wharton hardly knew what to say. "But I don't understand. Do you mean you came here to pick them for me, and you weren't going to eat me, ever?" "Of course I was going to eat you, until last night, that is." The owl spoke more softly. "Because we weren't speaking. I thought quite a bit last night. I thought about—" Look, they're having such a nice chat now, Flossie, aren't they? "I thought about our chats and other things, and I thought that perhaps having a friend might not be too bad. I mean, I don't need any friends, of course, but—" As he spoke, 2 feathers fluttered to his feet. Then the owl turned his head so that Wharton could look at him. When he spoke again, his voice was so soft the toad could barely hear him. "But if I ever do have a friend, I hope he is just like you, Wharton." Wharton was stunned. From somewhere deep inside, a small lump had come into his throat. "Do you mean you would like us to be friends?" he said. The owl nodded his head. Then the toad hopped around to where he could look at him. "I would be happy to be your friend, George." The owl looked down, and a big smile slowly spread across his battered face. "Well, that's fine. That's just fine. I'm so happy. I promise I'll never eat another toad again." He looked around at Si and his brothers, or a mouse for that matter. The mice cheered. "Now, if I can still fly," he said, shaking out a few more loose feathers, "I'd be glad to take you the rest of the way to your Aunt Tulia's." The toad hopped onto his back, shouting goodbye and thank you to Si and to all his brothers. It took the owl some time to lift out of the snow, but finally he rose into the air. The higher he flew, the stronger he became. Wharton waved to the mice far below. They grew smaller and smaller. Then the forest trees seemed to float beneath them as they made a great circle in the blue sky and turn towards Aunt Tulia's. And do you think we might say, Flossie, "And they all lived happily ever after"? The only problem is, do you think that Wharton is going to go and back home and live with Morton? Or do you think he's going to want to live with George the Owl? I think he'll go back to live with his brother Morton. And then Morton and Wharton will sometimes come and visit George the Owl, or perhaps George the Owl will sometimes come and visit them. But all in all, I'd say it was a very happy ending. And George the Owl will never be lonely again because now he's got a nice friend. So there we are. I liked that story. I hope you did too. Bye, Zeoflos.